A lot of times, one bad game can kill a franchise off, and then the game series is never seen again. But sometimes, games just go dormant for a while, and years, sometimes decades pass, and then randomly the game comes back, and it can sometimes be good, and a lot of the time, it's not that great. So today we thought it'd be interesting to take a deeper look at games that did this. It gets wild, trust me. Okay, let's talk about it. Now, if you liked Ninja Turtles in the 90s, but you wanted something that was maybe a little bit angrier, maybe a little weirder, maybe something that's capable of turning their feet into a giant cartoon boot mid-kick, then welcome to Battletoads, which is a surprisingly real game. It's about frogs and they fight. It's neat. Okay, all the way back in 1991, Rare released Battletoads on the NES, which was a beat-em-up platformer which starred these three toads with the names of Rash, Zitz, and Pimple, which are solid names. They're fighting like some, I don't know, Dark Queen or something, and they gotta rescue Princess Angelica. The important takeaway here is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was super popular in the 90s, and Rare was like, what can we do without having to license Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And then we have this. The thing is, you wouldn't expect the game series to be kind of cool. I mean, like, the graphics were pretty good for its time. There was like this hover bike stage, which is like really cool looking, but was one of the most insane difficulty spikes in a video game, especially on the NES. Like, people broke controllers over this. It probably also ended some friendships because the game could be played with friends, and, you know, your friend's not doing well enough. You know, what are they doing? So the game was a success, and there would be more things in the Battletoads series. There was an NES game, a Game Boy game. Weirdly enough, in 1993, there was Battletoads and Double Dragon, the Ultimate Team, which is a crazy crossover beat-em-up game. There was even a cool 3-player cabinet that was made for Battletoads. It even dialed up the cartoon violence and stuff because Nintendo wasn't there to stop them. And it seemed like things were going pretty well for a while until they just like abruptly stopped. There was no new games after 1994's arcade title. I guess everyone was just busy working on other games. And during the time of no Battletoads game, it kind of turned into like this ongoing meme, surprisingly enough, because it had been years since a Battletoads game. And then like there was this thing that circulated around kind of in the late 2000s where people would prank call GameStop and ask about Battletoads and pre-orders for Battletoads.
Thank you for calling GameStop.
I was wondering if you could search for a game for me if you tell me if you have it in stock or not.
Yeah?
The name's Battletoads. Do you have it in stock?
Battletoad, the old one?
Looking for a game.
What game?
Battletoads? I'm looking for... So you guys don't have Battletoads?
I'm actually calling all over the United States for this game.
Is it, what's that amphibian game? Something Amphibian Fighters or something like that, right?
It's called Battletoads.
It's called Battletoads. I don't have that one. I have the one that has your mother with it.
How much would that be?
Your mother?
Yeah.
Your mother's pretty cheap, so I'm gonna go with like $5.
My son told me about this new game coming out called Battletoads. You guys have that in stock right now?
No, actually the game has not come out, and it will never come out.
This is Morgan. How can I help you?
Do you guys have Battletoads?
Excuse me. If you guys continue to call, I will have to report these phone calls to the police. It's harassment.
Yeah, I don't know why this was a thing, but it was a thing. This later expanded to people prank calling the Church of Scientology to ask them about pre-orders for Battletoads.
I was actually looking for Battletoads because you're on the website for a pre-order.
Okay. This is the Church of Scientology.
It says BattletoadsPreorder.com.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never heard of that.
So I can't pre-order?
If I knew what it was, then I'd be glad to do it, but I just don't know what it is.
It's a game.
Yeah, no, this is a church.
Oh.
Looking at old memes that I wasn't aware of in 2007 because I was probably too focused on other subcultures on the internet like Super Smash Brothers and like those Warriors cat books. I was a weird middle schooler. Let's just keep going. Okay, listen, I know they sound like a dumb idea, but like they're these cats and they're in different clans and they fight each other and like they die. Like they die and then they lead groups and like it was cool. Okay. But yeah, no, this thing spun out. There was eventually this like video. It was like a April Fool's joke, not uploaded on April Fool's joke, but it was like a Wii Battletoads commercial parody, and it ended up kind of going a little viral, but this was just like a big culmination of the Battletoads meme for a while.
That was then. And this is now. Battletoads is back and badder than ever. With next generation 3D graphics and smoking in-your-face gameplay, Battletoads will get your blood pumping.
But honestly, for about 26 years, this game lived on as that one game that was impossible because of that one level, and that game that people prank call GameStop with. Eventually, though, there would be a little reference when Rare Replay had Battletoads in it, and there was even an achievement named Do You Have Battletoads, which was a reference to the prank call meme. And then in 2020, there was an official reboot. Randomly, people did not think this would come. And then they announced announced a new Battletoads game, which was developed by Delala Studios, and I guess Rare like talked them through it and assisted them a little in like conceptual stuff. And for the most part, I think the game was received mostly well. Like, people thought the humor was neat. Like, it was cool to have like a modern attempt to bring the Battletoads back. I don't think it was perfect, and I had a big, huge issue with the fact that they didn't allow for online cooperative play. It was local only in 2020, an Xbox first-party title multiplayer game. It really just rubbed me the wrong way. I know Luke and I installed it. We were going to play it back when it came out, and we decided to never play it because we were mad it didn't have online, and I stand by that. I'm not going to play this game unless they add online, then I'll play it. Shenmue isn't just a video game. It's the moment in history where Sega looked at the Dreamcast, then looked at their bank account and said, you know what? Let's just gamble everything. Why not? If we back up, the story really starts with Yu Suzuki's experience working at Sega, because he did a bunch of big hits like Hang On and Virtua Fighter and a lot of other popular games from arcades. But in the late 90s, Suzuki wanted to create something way bigger, something that was more cinematic, maybe something a little open world, maybe some adventure elements with full voice acting, maybe some day and night cycles, maybe some, NPC schedules, weather patterns, different details. This ended up becoming Shenmue, which was very, very ambitious for a game that was originally set up to be on the Sega Saturn. I mean, there's real footage of the Saturn gameplay, but then they moved it to the Sega Dreamcast, and that's what we ended up seeing. Now, Shenmue reportedly cost $47 to $70 million to make, depending on how much like research and development costs account for, which makes it one of the most expensive video games in history. And Sega was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And then the Dreamcast went under. Okay, so Shenmue launched in 1999, then later went worldwide in 2000. It's like it's honestly a little bit of a walking simulator from what I've played of it, but it was cool. The 3D town that you get to go and explore is really, really charming. I put like maybe 5 to 6 hours into it, so not like a full playthrough, but enough to get a feel for it. There's like mini games, there's like little quick time events. There were some forklifts, a surprising amount of forklifts, and it's a pretty cool game. The voice acting is, incredible is probably the right word.
Hattori-san? Yes? Yes? Do you know anybody who might know a man called Charlie?
Let me see. I can't think of anyone.
Critics love the game. Sales were surprisingly good. Maybe not enough to save the Dreamcast. If they wanted to save the Dreamcast, Sega would probably need like every single person in Japan to maybe buy 2 copies each, and that didn't end up happening. But Shenmue 2 would be greenlit, and it would release in 2001, and it was better. It released in 2001 on the Dreamcast, except in North America, it actually released on the Xbox in 2002, because I think the Dreamcast was like over. And they did a lot to improve the game. They had more NPCs, bigger cities, like Hong Kong. It was great, but after this game was really expensive also, Sega wasn't doing consoles anymore, and they kind of needed to save some money, so they never made another Shenmue game pretty much, at least for a long time, because for the next 2 decades, there was just a lot of people talking about the game, talking about forklifts, talking about whether or not the series will ever get some sort of update to it. Shenmue was planned to be a longer series, but nothing ever happened. But then in 2015, almost unexpectedly, Yu Suzuki announced Shenmue 3 via Kickstarter, and it actually broke funding records for a video game because fans were hyped. And then the game finally released in 2019 on the PS4 and PC, and it continued the story. It kept a lot of the slow, detail-oriented Shenmue style, and it did add some modern systems, but I think that caused opinions to be mixed because the game was a Shenmue sequel, for better and worse. And I think a lot of people forget how slow-paced the old Shenmue games were. They have this like really nostalgic feel for the game because it is a masterpiece in its own right, in its own weird way, but video games in 2019 have changed a lot by that point, and I don't think it was as good as the first 2. But I mean, it's a Shenmue game, and the saga was back, and people were happy about that, and now people are just waiting around for Shenmue 4, and it's been 6 years. It could come back, maybe. I don't know. Now, in general, when we're talking about other games, like the ones we've talked about already, where we're looking at games that were revived, and it could have gone either way, good or bad, there's definitely a very, very long list of games that had long hiatuses between title releases. This video, since we're trying not to make a 15-hour long video, is mostly focusing on like the nuanced ones that have some sort of an interesting story behind them that are worth talking about, right? But this video also can't exist if we like ignore some of the biggest ones that, we'll mention, but we might not go as in depth on because we want to look at the juicy stories, the meat and potatoes. What is that saying? Why do people say meat and potatoes when talking about things? Sorry. But yeah, we could look at literally any video game publisher and be like, yeah, they did some stuff like this. I mean, Bethesda, they had Prey, and then they made Prey. And these two games are not the same, or even remotely close to one another, but they have the same name. We've talked about this game before. Prey was like this one cool game, and then later on, there was a different team working on a different game, and Bethesda was like, hey, let's just call it Prey. And here we are. They're both okay in their own rights. Rage was an interesting one. There was a pretty big gap between Rage and Rage 2. I don't think a lot of people expected Rage 2 to ever even become a thing, but then it became a thing years later. I mean, you don't expect a game that got a 7 out of 10 in 2011 to get a sequel randomly in 2019 that then also would go on to get 7 out of 10s. I mean, we could just talk about Rockstar if we really wanted to. We have Grand Theft Auto 6 pending, Red Dead Redemption 2, that took quite a while. Even Max Payne 3, look at this. Ubisoft had the game Zombie all the way back in the day, and then as a launch title for the Wii U, we had Zombie U. It's like a zombie game in London. I really liked it. Luke really hated it. I understand why he hated it. It's not that good of a game, but I enjoyed it, so I don't know. Sega did the same thing with Nights into Dreams and the Wii thing. EA, what do they even do? We had Dragon Age recently is a good example, but I mean, there's a lot of franchises, take your pick, that you could talk about. There was a big gap between Sly Cooper 3 and Sly Cooper 4, and then Sly Cooper 4 finally released, and people complained about it not being as good as previous trilogy, and then they never made a Sly Cooper game again. What else do we got on our list? Half-Life is always a really interesting one, because Half-Life 2 Episode 2 left things off on a pretty big cliffhanger, and to this day, people are still waiting for Half-Life 3. There's always rumors around the corner. Who knows? Maybe by the time this video is uploaded, Half-Life 3 will be announced. I mean, what are the odds, right? Someone update in the comments if the game's been announced. I have a feeling it's not, but who knows? But I mean, Half-Life was dormant for years and years and years and years and years. And then Half-Life Alyx came out, unexpectedly pretty much. Everybody thought Half-Life was dead, but I do want to point this out, that it is interesting that Half-Life 2 Episode 2 released in 2007. Mind you, one of the biggest AAA franchise series out there. Like, Half-Life was so massively big in the early 2000s, comparable to Halo 2, like massive. You don't hear about Half-Life at the same scale as a franchise like Halo or Call of Duty, because those had regular games release over time. Half-Life didn't until 13 years later. And that's still wild to me, that there finally was another game at least resurrecting this IP after all that time. And sure, it was married to VR, which meant that most people wouldn't experience the game. I mean, I don't know. I'm not big on VR gaming. Maybe you are, but still. Nonetheless, the fact that Half-Life as an IP was alive again was really, really cool. And Half-Life Alyx was a competent game, and maybe one day Half-Life 3 will come, hopefully. Alternatively, we could sit around and talk about OutRun, I guess. Okay, OutRun's so interesting. I really like these games, but I don't think a lot of people know what they even are. They're just these simple arcade racing games, and you get to like choose your route, and it's one of those games where you have to like drive, and you have a time limit, and you have to get the checkpoint or else your game ends, and it's a whole thing. It originally was an arcade game, first released in '86, and I mean, this is like high tech for 1986, I feel like. Not enough credit is given to OutRun. And there would be a lot of OutRun games released through the late 80s into the early 90s, and then it just abruptly stopped, and there was nothing. 1993 saw the final release in the form of OutRun 2019, which was a futuristic sequel to OutRun. That's pretty cool. This is what 2019 looks like, guys. It's crazy out here. It would be 10 years before the franchise would be resurrected in the form of OutRun 2. Just definitively OutRun 2, the sequel, released on arcades in 2003, and it did see an Xbox console release in 2004. And I played a bit of this one, surprisingly, and it's pretty fun. It's like a 3D version of OutRun. I don't know what else I expected. I felt like there could have been a little bit more going on, like more things to do. It really just feels like a 3D version of OutRun. After 10 years time, maybe could have done a little more. There later would be OutRun 2006 Coast to Coast, which was better in every way, but no one really talks about this game, so I mean, that's fine too. Then there was like an arcade game in 2009, and then OutRun's dead again, so who knows. Apparently in 2025 though, Universal Pictures announced that they're developing a live action movie based on OutRun with Michael Bay directing, so I don't know what's going on, but who knows. It's got to be great right at this point.
Are you excited for the OutRun movie?
Yeah, dude. If I can't wait for Michael Bay to pull up some shit.
Okay guys, I gotta be honest about something. I never knew From Software had their own mech franchise called Armored Core until Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon came out in 2023. And when I started researching for this video, I realized it had been 10 years since they released the previous one. I also didn't realize how many goddamn games there were in this franchise. And in order to highlight why this 10-year gap is so weird for this franchise, I'm just gonna go through all the games real quick. Starting in 1997, we have Armored Core for the PS1. Same year, there was a prequel called Armored Core Project Phantasma, also for the PS1. 1999 saw Armored Core Master of Arena, a direct sequel to the first Armored Core game, which also was one of those PS1 games that came on 2 discs. 1 year later, Armored Core 2 released for the PS2, which was technically a sequel, but also was set like 70 years into the future, now on Mars, not on Earth anymore. But this spawned its own direct sequel called Armored Core 2, Another Age in 2001. But then they were like, let's reboot the series, but still number it as if it's a sequel. And they did so with Armored Core 3 in 2002. And that is where things actually get even crazier. Armored Core 3 got a direct sequel with Armored Core 3 Silent Line in 2003. Then that got its own sequel called Armored Core Nexus, which then got a multiplayer spin-off called Armored Core Ninebreaker in the same year. 2004 also saw Armored Core Formula Front, which was a PSP launch title, and now it's a dystopian future where the mechs are used in some sort of sporting battle event, but it's still connected to this reboot storyline that started with Armored Core 3 somehow. They would wrap up this reboot storyline with Armored Core Last Raven in 2005 though, and now you'd think they would take a break. I mean, they released 11 games in 8 years for this one franchise. Nope, Armored Core 4 rebooted the series again in 2006. From there, they would slow down slightly for the next couple titles. A direct sequel to 4 was released in 2008 called Armored Core 4 Answers. Then they took 4 years to make Armored Core 5, which, if I'm understanding this right, at first was kind of ambiguous if it's another reboot or a continuation of the Armored Core 4 reboot storyline. But then they released Armored Core Verdict Day in 2013, once again one of those direct sequels they like to do, and that apparently explained a bunch of lore from 5 and how it's all connected together. So this was still in the second reboot storyline. And at this point, they made 15 games in this 15-year-old franchise, and for most of these years, From Software was only known for Armored Core. Surprisingly, most of these 15 games were well received by fans, besides like 1 or 2 of them. But in 2013, after Verdict Day released, they stopped making Armored Core games, and it was for one simple reason. They released a little game called Dark Souls in 2011, and that became a massive global hit, elevating them to one of the most prestigious game developers out there. And they did Demon's Souls 2 years earlier, but that was more of a sleeper hit. Dark Souls was really where it took off, and they wanted to ride this momentum. And with these 2 games, they basically invented a new genre of gaming, and they would just keep getting better at it, trying new things and refining it through sequels to Dark Souls or other franchises they would make with similar gameplay like Bloodborne, Sekiro and Elden Ring, with Elden Ring being their peak in my opinion. But yeah, as I said, they totally stopped making Armored Core games for like 10 years, and then boom, Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon dropped in 2023. Also, by the way, this is another reboot to the Armored Core storyline, so does that mean we can expect another direct sequel soon, or a multiplayer spin-off or something like that? I mean, if the franchise's history shows us anything, then yeah, there should be a sequel soon.
2007, what a year that was. And an interesting year because Skate became a mainstay game in the skateboarding genre. Because essentially this game was like the serious alternative to Tony Hawk, because instead of you like grinding on a Taco Bell sign, you are now trying to do a kickflip with an analog stick. And that was cool. It made it feel like you were actually flicking the board. The game did really well, surprisingly. So even with the minimalistic title, that's kind of the same titling mechanic that we use in a Rocket Sloth video. It's like all lowercase and had like a period at the end. They turned it into like a pretty regular series for a short while. Skate 2 came out in 2009, and then Skate 3 came out just 1 year later in 2010. And while I think Skate 2 was kind of the greatest game in the series, Skate 3 was the more full, fleshed out experience in the series. Both of them were great. Skate 3 was awesome. It reviewed really well. The Hall of Meat was a lot of fun. You remember Hall of Meat?
Yeah. Do you remember how popular that was on YouTube randomly, like too?
Dude, randomly, but years after Skate 3 came out. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think I remember reading an article all the way back in the day that like they had already finished like producing copies of Skate 3 because it was like 2013 when the YouTube push made Skate 3 popular again. And they started manufacturing Skate 3 again because of the popularity of the videos on YouTube. And I think they had already shut down Black Box, who made Skate 3 at that point. So there was no hope for a new skate game in sight. The skateboarding genre was kind of falling off because there was like Tony Hawk Ride and Tony Hawk Shred, which both flopped commercially pretty quickly. I think Shred only sold 3,000 copies in its first week, which, that's a little rough. Which then meant to publishers that maybe skateboarding games aren't hip anymore amongst the youth. So it looked like a bad investment. And EA decided, you know what? Let's just not do it. But fans would continuously spam hashtag Skate4 at like anything EA tweeted for years, any type of like live E3 event, they were spamming it as well. There was the whole like make America skate again trend that went on for a while. And eventually EA caved and they decided they're going to make a new studio, and they called it Full Circle. They opened it up in Vancouver, and it was just to bring back Skate, finally, after a 15-year gap. And then it was a long time of development because it felt like this game was taking forever to be made. And then we get more information about the game, a lot of play tests, and then the game's early access release a couple of months ago. The new game, while it is technically Skate 4, it's just called Skate. They can't do a number 4, right? And it's a free-to-play soft reboot focused on
microtransactions.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you're not wrong. An always online microtransaction live service version of Skate in this city called San Vansterdam, which does have crossplay. It does have user-generated content. I think it has an iPhone and Android release coming up. And I think most people will agree that there's some good news with this game. It plays like Skate 1, 2, and 3, specifically 3. And that's great. There are some weird things about this game besides the microtransactions and some of the other cringe parts of the game. Like when I was playing, I haven't played in a couple months, but dark flipping wasn't in the game, which was weird. I could roll faster than I could skate, which I thought was a weird transportation choice. It's weird because everything around the gameplay is pretty positive, but the bad side of the game is pretty much everything else. The art style and the vibe feels off. It definitely does not feel like Skate. It feels like a very corporate made game, which makes sense because it was made by a corporation, but I don't know how to explain it. It feels like a bunch of people sat around a room and they're like, what do young people like? And they wrote down their interpretations and then put it in the game. Rather than actually having an understanding of like, I don't know, something that would be relevant, like skateboarding culture. And the thing is, I'm not saying Skate needs to have a good story, but oh my God, is the story and setup of Skate 4 like really, really cringe. Like it's bad. I mean, in Skate 2, you started right after you got out of prison and they're like, hey, you just got out of prison? Nice. Do you want to go skate? And that's it. And then you start meeting pros and stuff. Skate 4, they're telling you about
city council.
Yeah, there's like city council stuff, and you're trying to like make the city more skateboard friendly. Why? It feels really, really off. Hall of Meat's missing in the traditional form. Like in the old games, it would show you like a little layout, like an x-ray of what bones you broke and how much your medical bills were. In this game, they wrote into the lore that there's like some technology that keeps you impervious from actually getting hurt. Why? Like, why? And then there's no offline mode. And then it's like all the microtransactions, and they're kind of expensive for a skate game.
Wasn't there a $40 Dead Space skin?
And then like we could go way more in depth on Skate 4, and this is nitpicking at this point. But if you are bored, just like look at some of the songs that are in the game and just like listen, like look at the lyrics. There's some weird choices of songs in the game. They were just like picking soundtracks out and they heard this song come up on their playlist and like, this is Skate. Let's put it in the game. It's weird. There's an annihilation of like any type of understanding of like what the skateboard punk scene was in the late 90s and 2000s. And the old Tony Hawk games played into that so well. If you play like Tony Hawk Underground nowadays, which I just recently beat like 2 nights ago, man, it was fun. Like I was like graffitiing and stealing cars, knocking people into the water in Alcatraz. That was in Tony Hawk 4, the Alcatraz part. But the rest of it was in Underground. Skate 2 had stuff like that. Skate 3 even had some stuff like that. But Skate 4 it's non-existent. It's really annoying. Because the gameplay's good. They got the gameplay right. Just the rest of the game's awful. Like it's not appealing.
Usually it's a turd wrapped in Christmas wrapping, but this is a Christmas present wrapped in
yeah. I think that's That's how the Bible says it.
I think we should talk about Doom a little bit because Doom is a long running game series. Doom originally came out in 1993, and then a year later, Doom 2 came out in 1994, and these were really big deals. And then, like 10 years later, Doom 3 came out, and it definitely wasn't what people expected it to be. People wanted something that felt maybe more akin to, like, I don't know, Doom 64, or, I mean, Doom 1 and 2 did things right. Doom 3 was just very, very different. It didn't have the same people who worked on the original Doom, so I get that. And it was much slower, darker, more horror focused. It did sell well, and a lot of people didn't like it, but there was a separate group of people that did enjoy it. I just think that even the people that did enjoy it realized that it wasn't like a Doom game, it's just its own thing. So yeah, Doom 3 was a weird one. And then a few years later, development on Doom 4 would actually begin in 2007. But this game ended up getting canceled. We don't know too much about what this Doom 4 game from 2007 was going to be like, but there has been talks from previous people who worked on it. Like, for instance, producer Marty Strayton said that it felt kind of like Call of Doom, which is like a Call of Duty inspired Doom game, and it had a lot of cutscenes and emotional storytelling, and I guess that's one way of doing it. Long story short, as development continued, it started to stall out, and I think that the people working on it realized that it wasn't a Doom game. So after a little bit later, that project got canceled, and it wouldn't be until 2012 when they would greenlight working on a brand new Doom game again. This time it was just a reboot to Doom, and that is where like Doom 2016 comes into play, because this time around they decided to focus on making a modern version of the gameplay that was fun in the original Doom. And look at that, it actually was pretty cool. Like they kind of were just like, you know what, the story doesn't really have to matter, it just has to happen, you know, make the character not care and just go for it. And that's what they did, and I think Doom 2016 did really well. The next two Dooms that came out afterwards were maybe a little bit more mixed, but for the most part I think people were like, yeah, this is solid. But man, Doom 2016 is a great example of a game that came back after years and years and years and kind of did it right. I think, at least. I don't know. On the other hand, another game series that's not an FPS that came back after years and years is Baldurs Gate. And this one's interesting because Baldurs Gate 1 and 2 from 1998 and 2000 respectively were pretty big deals, I think. I mean, this was big for PC RPG games. It kind of set the standard for like a video game based on Dungeons and Dragons. And I think people were excited for the potential of a Baldur's Gate 3, but then nothing ever came. It seemed like in the early 2000s, there might have been plans for a Baldur's Gate 3. It was a little messy though because of BioWare and Interplay, you know, being companies. Interplay owned the Baldur's Gate publishing rights, but BioWare owned the engine and technology, and they couldn't agree on terms for a third game, which meant there wasn't going to be a third game. So instead, Interplay was like, all right, we'll just get a different studio to make a new Baldur's Gate game. They got Black Isle, the studio that did Icewind Dale and Planetscape Torment. And this one was darker, a more grounded D&D story, but it wasn't a continuation of the original saga. And the project was actually kind of deep into development, but then Interplay kind of ran out of money financially in 2003, so the game ended up getting canceled. And Baldur's Gate as we knew it would go into hibernation. And then from there, Baldur's Gate was a little weird. It was a lot of re-releases. There'd be other games that would come and go that kind of, you know, felt good, like Dark Alliance or something. BioWare was working on other things like Knights of the Old Republic, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and the D&D license kind of just bounced between different publishers. Nothing really lined up for a true Baldur's Gate revival for quite some time. But then interestingly enough, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, it seemed like a lot of these PC CRPG type games started kind of picking up a bit, like Divinity Original Sin, Pillars of Eternity, Wasteland 2. These games kind of showed that like these large scale tactical RPG games still had an audience. I think Larian Studios was kind of a good fit, and Wizards of the Coast kind of liked what they saw. So they ended up getting approached by Wizards of the Coast, not the other way around. They offered them Baldur's Gate, and they were like, yeah. And then development started. And then long story short, Baldur's Gate 3 was born. And the game was kind of the gold standard for these types of games. Despite the fact that I've tried to get into it multiple times, I don't think this genre is my personal favorite, but I can at least respect why so many people like it, because there is a lot of depth to these games. So that's cool. I'm glad people are happy with it.
Do you guys remember Lollipop Chainsaw? It was one of those games that you would see announced as a teenager in 2011 and go like, hell yeah. And I mean, I don't need to beat around the bush with this one. This game leaned heavily into the sex sells on marketing and the game content. And I mean, that's mostly what made it appealing to a 16-year-old like myself. I mean, like 16 back then, not today. There's some more to this game though. Like, the developer behind the game is Grasshopper Manufacturer, which is the studio of legendary Japanese game designer Suda51, known for creating the No More Heroes franchise, for example. And on top of that, James Gunn wrote the script for the game as kind of like a B-movie zombie parody, which made the story pretty fun as well. On release, the reception for the game was kind of like alright, nothing like super special, mostly because of the repetitive hack and slash gameplay. Commercially though, their strategy paid off because this was a success and became the studio's most sold game, probably because of the content and marketing of the game. But the game did also become a cult classic of the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. So with the success, why was there never another game, like a sequel or a spin-off or a follow-up game or anything? Well, less than a year after Lollipop Chainsaw was released, the developer was acquired by a massive Japanese publisher called Gun-Ho Online Entertainment. This acquisition effectively severed the relationship between the developer and the publisher of Lollipop Chainsaw, Kadokawa Games, which actually was the rights holder to the Lollipop Chainsaw franchise. And Gun-Ho Entertainment didn't want Suda51 and his studio to make sequel games for rival publishers, so they had them work on new intellectual properties or online games. And I guess Kadokawa Games didn't think they could make a true sequel without Suda51 being the director, so I guess they never did. Also, I mean, part of it is probably that the game didn't really become a cult classic until a few years later after the 360 and PS3 era. So Lollipop Chainsaw arrived in a flash, disappeared just as fast, but still was a game that people remembered. Until 2022, when a remake was announced, which would later be changed to just be a remaster by the publisher Kadokawa Games, who were now called Tragami Games. Neither Suda51 or James Gunn were involved in this remaster though, and after some delays, Lollipop Chainsaw Repop was released in 2024 for Switch, PS5, PC, and then Microsoft console. The reviews from critics kind of landed in the similar ballpark as the original, but fan reception was really positive, and a lot of people enjoyed the opportunity to easily replay this game or play it for the first time. Sales were right too, selling over 250,000 copies, which then, earlier this year, led to the announcement of an anime adaptation and a new video game in the Lollipop Chainsaw series. In the announcement, they also state that they are committed to honoring the spirit of the original work, and that there are some developers who worked on the original game on the project as well. Actually, I'm reading this announcement and it's kind of crazy because they specifically say that they won't impose excessive creative restrictions in the name of DEI. Anyways, not only did Lollipop Chainsaw come back with a remaster after over 12 years, the game is finally getting a brand new game as well. Possibly a sequel, or maybe just something similar styled, or maybe a spin-off. There isn't really much information out there, but hopefully it'll at least be something nice to look at, if you know what I mean.
Okay, can we get some cool slot machine noises in the background or something? Because there's 6 games I want to talk about kind of quickly that all had really big gaps in between. We could stop the slot machine music now. I just felt like it was a good, hyper-upper. You guys know what I'm trying to say. Psychonauts. It originally came out in 2005, and the main idea of it is, what if platformers had emotional depth, maybe some psychic powers, maybe some circus trauma, maybe this whole milkman conspiracy theory, and the publisher was like, oh, hey, let's do it. It's an interesting game. You play as Rasputin, this kid who runs away from the circus to join a psychic summer camp where the counselors have PTSD or something, but the twist of the game is that every level takes place inside of someone's brain, which then makes this surreal experience with repressed memories and emotional baggage. Literally, it was a really cool concept for a game that then flopped commercially, but was a cult classic, and people talked about how great this game was for a really long time. Eventually, there was enough love to crowdfund support for Psychonauts 2, which did finally release in 2021 after 16 years, a ton of delays. There was a whole bankruptcy scare that the studio had, a bunch of other stuff, and Microsoft swooped in and put it on Game Pass and stuff. The game was pretty well received, I think, but yeah, Psychonauts 2 did exist. Then there's game series like Shadow Warrior, which first came out in 1997 during an era where every FPS hero was a sarcastic one-liner machine type character, but you get a game that has lines like, you want to wash Wang.
You want to wash Wang? Or you want to watch Wang wash Wang?
Now, the original game had ninjas, demons, a lot of great jokes.
Oh, must be American made. Holy cow! Look like Duke Nukem! Cowabunga!
And you would think there'd be more games, but nothing ended up happening with this game series until 2013 when Flying Wild Hog rebooted the series into this modern, stylish, surprisingly heartfelt FPS where sword combat surprisingly feels kind of good. And Lo Wang got a little bit of personality beyond just being a 1990s joke book. Then there was Shadow Warrior 2, which got a bunch of Diablo aspects of becoming a looter shooter type game for no reason whatsoever. And I think there was even co-op introduced, which
maybe Luke and I played a little bit of this. I think we did. It was kind of fun. But then we found out Shadow Warrior 3 was not going to have co-op, and we lost interest in both of the games. But Shadow Warrior 3 came out in 2022, which was still a little bit of time later, but it was a little bit of a tighter arena shooter. It was maybe a little short of a game, but I think for the most part, people who played it had fun while it lasted. There was Wasteland, which was an interesting series before the era of Fallout being the main post-apocalyptic RPG game. There was Wasteland in 1988. It was a pretty cool RPG game that then went into hibernation for like 25 years. But Wasteland 2 finally came out after it was crowdfunded in 2012 by Brian Fargo, who was one of the original creators. It was kind of like, you know what? If no one's going to make games like the original Fallout anymore, I will. And let's do Wasteland 2. And Wasteland 2 brought back like isometric tactical combat, had some branching storylines, maybe a couple of morally questionable choices. Now, this game ended up being a hit, which was cool because the game was kind of that old school, messy RPG design, where you save one town, but then you kind of doom the other towns, and you spend most of your time just running around looting junk you probably won't need. But nonetheless, Wasteland 3 then got greenlit, which added co-op, which added even more chaos. And I think, if I understand correctly, there was like a subplot on like a cult surrounding Ronald Reagan, which I think is pretty interesting. So maybe I need to look into Wasteland 3 a little more. There's Elite Dangerous, which started all the way back in 1984, which was kind of like, what if we made a space game that also had math in it? And it somehow kind of became a classic until like it was forgotten about. And then 30 years later, Elite Dangerous comes back, and I don't know, this game's interesting to me because it's a game where on one end, you're convincing yourself you're having fun while you're maybe not really having fun because the game feels a little bit too much like a real job. But in there, people have had fun. You get to trade cargo, mine asteroids. You could spend a ton of time working on something, and then you just die. I really wanted to like this game. I understand why some people like the game, and the game does give you access to the entire Milky Way galaxy, which is cool. I think there's like niches in this community that make this game really special. That's the experience. There's a lot of interesting things. It's immersive, it's impressive, occasionally punishing. Like you can buy a new ship, upgrade the frame shift drive, take off with confidence, forget to request docking permission, and then get vaporized by airport security. I don't know. These types of games I just die in a lot. And then we have Wolfenstein, which was notorious for just like having periods of time with a lot of large gaps in between just for the game to be reinvented later on. The first Wolfenstein game came out in 81, then Beyond Castle Wolfenstein came out in 84, and then there'd be nothing until Wolfenstein 3D in 1992. And then there'd be nothing again until 2001 with Return to Castle Wolfenstein. Then there was surprisingly a few games kind of on and off over the next decade, little gap, and then we saw the Wolfenstein 2009 game, which was pretty cool, and then a little 5-year gap because I guess the game wasn't successful enough for them to do more with, and Bethesda got the rights, and then the Wolfenstein New Order came out, which was like a soft reboot, but not a full reboot. And Wolfenstein's been going hard ever since, except now we're on a new hiatus era because it's been 6 years since the last Wolfenstein game, almost 7. So we'll see Wolfenstein one day, I'm sure.
Back in the day, Rare was known for Nintendo games like Banjo-Kazooie, Star Fox Adventures, or Donkey Kong Country, but they also made games that were more targeted towards older teenagers or adults, like Conker's Bad Fur Day. And on top of that, they also tapped into the arcade fighting game market in the 90s, where games like Mortal Kombat were super popular. And Rare made their very own arcade fighting game with Killer Instinct in 1994. And it was a massive hit commercially and critically, and would get an SNES and Game Boy port the following year. Immediately, Rare started working on the follow-up game Killer Instinct 2, which would release in arcades in early 1996, and later that year would get a gold version for the N64. This game was also a commercial success, and rumors for Killer Instinct 3 started pretty much after the second game released on home consoles. For example, in 1997, it was reported that Rare is knee-deep in development of Killer Instinct 3 and that it's due to make an appearance next year. But besides rumors, there was nothing ever announced, which was weird because they were so quick to work on the second game initially. But then in September of 2002, something bad happened. Rare was acquired by Microsoft. The early 2000s really did start off with back-to-back bad Septembers. For some fans, this acquisition did ignite some new hope, but there was never anything officially announced. And as the years passed, there was multiple previous Rare developers that voiced that they really wanted to make a Killer Instinct 3 for years, but Microsoft wasn't interested in the franchise. But in 2012, that changed, and Microsoft renewed the trademark for Killer Instinct, and after sorting out some issues with the trademark caused by some irrelevant one-season TV show from 2005 that was also killed Killer Instinct, they greenlit a reboot of the series. Double Helix Studios was the developer put in charge, and they started working on the game. And Rare was kind of only like an assist/advisory studio alongside for the project, but they were still involved. At E3 2013, they started started showing off the game, and they showed some of the old characters coming back, and they even did polls asking fans about which character they would like to see again. And then in November of 2013, this game finally released, and it was just called Killer Instinct. But this meant that after a 17-year break, Killer Instinct was finally back, and this time it was an Xbox One exclusive free-to-play game with a pretty weird monetization system. Basically, if you downloaded the game for free, you had one character that you could play, and there was like a weekly rotational character or something, but obviously you could purchase more characters, and you know, this was kind of criticized at the time, and it did feel like the game was also lacking a lot of content, so overall the reviews were pretty mixed at launch. Gameplay was praised though, and that is a very important part for fighting games, and overall I think it's a pretty okay game, especially after it received some updates and content, and it would receive 3 seasons overall, switching to Iron Galaxy as the main developer for season 2 and 3, and there was also a PC release in 2015. Overall though, I don't think this game was really that successful, and like after they did 3 seasons they wrapped up the support for it, and we haven't seen anything new from Killer Instinct since then, so I guess it's been another like 10 to 12 years depending on if you count the PC release as the last thing. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it'll be another 5 to 10 years before there's another Killer Instinct game, or we'll just never see the franchise again.
How many of you ever wanted to fly a $50 million jet, but you didn't want to worry about crashing it into like building or a mountain or anything like that? Luke, have you?
No.
Oh. Well, this analogy doesn't really make sense then. But Microsoft Flight Simulator lets you live out that fantasy without ending up on the news. Now, this series technically has been running longer than some real airlines have been around, but it seemed like for a while some of the games would only release like every few years and every 10 years, and then just like there'd be nothing for a long time. There was the original flight simulator type games way back in the earliest days, starting all the way back in 82 when computers had the processing power of... What's like a good example of something that doesn't have a lot of processing power?
Texas Instruments calculator, but that's probably too high.
I was gonna think like a Pop-Tart.
Yeah. Or like those clocks you hook up to a potato.
Yeah. Or like those fake videos in 2007 when people would like charge their iPod with like a onion and Gatorade, and they're like, oh, the electrolytes from the Gatorade are charging my iPod, and people believed it. I was one of those people who believed it. I think now I know better.
You think? Or you know?
I mean, there's a chance I never tested it. Did anyone here ever test it?
Yeah, I guess so. You know, maybe that Gatorade.
Yeah, dude. So, Flight Simulator, it all started with this guy named Bruce Artwick, who thought to himself, what if a computer could pretend to be a plane? And while other people probably were like, please no, he did it anyways. And then Flight Simulator was born. There was Flight Simulator in like the 80s, like Flight Simulator 3, 4, 5, 98, because they started using years instead of editions, 2000, 2002, and 2004, which I do remember trying out at a Best Buy once on their little computer setup, and I couldn't figure out how to take off. That was my whole experience with Flight Sim for the longest time. And there were like hardcore simulations, you know, those people who had those really cool cockpit setups in their basements that were probably more expensive than the house which housed said basement, but nonetheless, you know, Flight Simulator really hit a peak around Flight Simulator X in 2006. I think that's when people generally think things were at the best. And actually there was supposed to be more expansions coming out, but Microsoft ended up shutting down Aces Game Studio, which was the team responsible for Flight Simulator, just about 3 years after the launch of the game. So there was nothing from Flight Simulator, because Microsoft killed the studio that was making it. Without having a studio to make Flight Simulator, believe it or not, there wasn't any new Flight Simulator games. Funny how that works. But then, after a 14-year gap out of nowhere, Microsoft just drops in and they're like, hey, we're making a new Flight Simulator. Guess what? We got Asobo Studios, and we sent them off to go scan the entire Earth using Bing Maps. They were like against using Google Maps. They're like, there's no way. We're using a proprietary Bing. We spent all this money on the Bing browser and the Bing It On challenge, that marketing campaign where you got to compare Google and Bing searches, and then it would tell you which one you used. Did you ever do that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, in America we had this. It was like a big commercial campaign. They said, do the Bing It On challenge. You go to the website, you type in a search, it shows you both Google and Bing side by side, but you don't know which one's which. And you have to vote on which answer you like better. And then at the end, it's supposed to show you that Bing is better than Google. Except both times I did it, I guessed Google. So I don't know if it worked. It backfired, I think, in that regard. Okay, I do have to say, the fact that they did the whole photorealistic world by scanning the Earth is really cool for a flight sim game. This got me into flight sim. I was always awful at flight sim, as you know, Luke. I never learned how to land the airplane correctly. So instead, I made it a little game in my own mind where I try to practice landing the plane without any assistance or guidance or knowledge on how to land a plane using an Xbox controller. Results were varied, but I did pass every single landing challenge in the game after about a year of trying, even the hard ones. And there were times where I shut the engine completely off to slow down to the right speed, then turn the engine back on at the last second so that I can try to like do something. It was crazy. It was a lot of fun. Some of the lowest scores that I didn't even think were possible. I think at one point I got 3 out of 250,000 points. And that was like my claim to fame. But I landed the plane and beat the level, and that's what matters. So yeah, Flight Sim 2020, great game. There was still some performance issues. Some people were not happy with parts of the game. But then 4 years later, they did a sequel, and man, it was really bad. Do we need to talk about 2024?
Also, it's funny how they're going from like not making a game for like what 14 years to making a sequel like that's really unfinished and unpolished in 4 years. I don't know.
You know how like Madden, like the new Madden coming out right now, the new Madden's already out, right? We're in 2025 and Madden 26 is already out. We're at the end of 2025, right? 26 is already out. I thought it was weird that they kept delaying Flight Sim, but they already had called it Flight Sim 2024, that they released it at the very end of 2024 and then still called it 2024 instead of calling it like 2025. It made it feel like it was outdated within like 2 months.
I think it's coming to PlayStation, right? Will it also still be called like Flight Simulator 2024, but it's releasing in 2025? I don't know, it's just kind of weird.
I mean, honestly, probably. It's not good. 2024 is really, really bad. The voice acting, it uses like AI, but not even the good AI. It uses like that Microsoft text reader.
Flying too fast. I was hoping to have more time.
It's laggy. It loads really slow. It's just all around worse than 2020.
This next one is very confusing and kind of hard to explain, but I think it's interesting at the end. So, stay with me. It comes all together at the end. In the late 80s, early 90s, Takashi Nishiyama, who designed Street Fighter at Capcom, would depart Capcom and join the company SNK and work on a spiritual successor called Fatal Fury, which would release in 1991. And Fatal Fury would see 3 mainline games and a bunch of spin-offs all the way up until Fatal Fury Mark of the Wolves released in 1999. And the main draw of Fatal Fury was they had this 2-lane system where you could just jump between foreground and background. So, they tried making it stand out. It was pretty successful, well received, and SNK was also known for another fighting game franchise in the early 90s called Art of Fighting, which they started shortly after in 1992. And that also had 3 games between 92 and 96. In 93, they released a game called Fatal Fury Special, which had a secret Easter egg where one of the characters from Art of Fighting was a boss in Fatal Fury. And the reception of this Easter egg made him realize that people kind of just want to see characters from their different games fighting each other. And like, mind you, this was way before like Smash Bros. Or like Marvel vs. Capcom and stuff like that, right? There was an issue because, these games had different canons and had different stories. So they would create a new series called King of Fighters, which, I mean, you probably know King of Fighters, right?
I know of it, yeah.
They put characters from Fatal Fury, Art of Fighting, and 2 other completely unrelated IPs that they had into a game and just said King of Fighters is a parallel universe and the cans are all separate. So now that is established, I can explain what happened with Fatal Fury, essentially. By the end of the 90s into the early 2000s, SNK was in financial trouble after they tried releasing multiple Neo Geo consoles that all kind of failed. Have you ever had a Neo Geo? I don't think I know anyone who had a Neo Geo.
No. I don't even know if I've seen one in person. I've seen a picture of one.
Yeah, me too. There's some pictures. But they also had financial issues because they tried opening a theme park, which was also a massive financial failure. So they filed for bankruptcy in 2001. That didn't last long because by August 2001, they had been bought by a company called Playmore, and they would reform the company as SNK Playmore in August of 2001. And that new company was obviously trying to not lose money like SNK was doing before. They kind of figured, like, why make another Fatal Fury game that only has Fatal Fury characters when we can make more King of Fighters games that have Fatal Fury characters and other characters, and the series is doing better anyways. So King of Fighter kind of became their main focus and, became a prominent fighting game and got a lot of releases. There's a lot of King of Fighter games over the years. Also, the original people that worked on Fatal Fury, like most of them left and aren't there anymore, and they didn't have the key members to make Fatal Furies. So the 1999 game was the last one released for a long time. And over the years, SNK as a company kept struggling, and they would be sold off multiple times. And then in 2020, they get acquired by the Musk Foundation, which is owned by Mohammed bin Salman, who's the crown prince of Saudi Arabia. And all of a sudden, SNK had unlimited money. Like, you know, overnight, basically, they didn't have to worry about going bankrupt anymore, like they had been for like years. Immediately in 2020, management at SNK was like, yeah, we'd like to revive Fatal Fury. And 2 years later at EVO, they would announce there was a new game in the making. And then it took a while. And in 2025, we saw Fatal Fury City of the Wolves releasing like a direct sequel to the 1999 game, meaning there was a 26-year gap between these games. And that game was critically well received, but there was a lot of controversy surrounding it. A lot of it caused by the involvement of the Saudi Arabian government, park company, foundation, whatever. Like they introduced Cristiano Ronaldo as a fighter into the game.
What's interesting is with Fatal Fury, in the section earlier in the video where I'm like, I'm going to talk about 6 games. Originally, I had a section for Fatal Fury, and I might have recorded it, forgetting that you were going to do a section on Fatal Fury. I just wanted to add a couple of things because I had made some jokes for Fatal Fury that are now going to be lost because you did a much more in-depth version than my 40-second run-through of the game. They're not really jokes. It was just like, you know, the lighthearted, like, I say dumb things. So can I share them with you?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
They're not going to land as well. I looked at some of the characters, like Terry Bogard, who's kind of like the main mascot, who kind of also looks like a truck stop mascot. And he also has Andy Bogard, who's like his brother, who's a little more serious. And then the biggest takeaway is that this Terry Bogard guy asks everybody if they are okay. He says, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And then proceeds to like commit manslaughter after asking them if they're okay. Like he then beats them up. I just think that Fatal Fury is a very interesting game. I don't know why they have that voice line in the game, but it just made me question a lot of things. And then now this game shows up again, you know, like a dad finally coming back with the milk after 2 decades. It's pretty cool.
And also, you know how I mentioned Art of Fighting earlier?
Yeah.
They also announced there might be a new Art of Fighting game in the works, so that might also come back.
2 milks.
Yeah, 2 milks. 1 chocolate, 1 whole.
None of that almond.
Oh, dude. Oh, how about some soy milk?
Oh, dude, the soy boys. Who let the dogs out?
Who let them out? Did we ever find out? The Badger Men. Are they the ones that invented the drink at Taco Bell, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay.
You ever see that, like, old post from the mid-2000s when Baja Blast was exclusive to Taco Bell? And the guy, like, starts building a contraption so they can buy a Baja Blast, fill up a cup that then has like a tube in the cup that runs through the sleeve into like a repository somewhere. And then like as he was posting about this, other like engineers started responding with like ways that he could iterate and make it better and optimize it. And he ended up like getting like a gallon of the Baja Blast. I assume it went flat, but
all right, now that we figured that out, let me ask you this question. Have you ever heard of the term Eurojank?
No.
What do you think it is?
When you spend money on something and it disappears, like it doesn't show for itself.
Okay.
You just asked me what I thought it meant. Right? I just took a guess. I guessed. I'm sorry.
All right. Okay.
What does it mean?
Well, it is a term to describe like a certain type of game from Europe, especially like in the early to late 2000s. It was kind of like just like janky and like buggy. You ever seen the original Witcher? It looked like they could be a AAA game, but they're just like a little too unpolished, right? Like just like janky. Actually, when Cyberpunk came out, that term reemerged because people started calling Cyberpunk Eurojank as well. The pinnacle of that term is actually the Stalker series. I think that's where it like really initially started and became popular, because in 2007 through 2009 they released 3 Stalker games with Shadow of Chernobyl, Clear Sky, and Call of Pripyat, all developed by GSC Game World. And you know, they released them and people felt like the games were okay. They varied in quality very heavily and they all had different things about them that people liked or disliked. Like for example, the first one was like more of a horror game, and then they kind of lost it as they went on and stuff like that. They were all different levels of like broken and buggy, but still people liked them. And the first one sold like 1.5 million copies, which was a big amount for like a studio like that. You know, then they would release the 2 other games because of the success of the first one. And then also in 2010, after the third one released, they did announce Stalker 2 initially. That was being developed for a good year, but during that year they faced like management or financial troubles. It's actually not quite clear what exactly happened behind the scenes, because at first they downsized from 200 developers to 50 developers. Then by the end of 2011 the company actually went defunct and had closed down and Stalker 2 was cancelled. But in 2014 GSC Game World actually reopened and was reformed, and initially they didn't want to do another Stalker game right away, so they focused on remaking one of the earlier strategy games called Cossack? I don't know. Cossack? I don't know, whatever, it's on the screen, it's a weird word. And after they released that, then they were like, oh, now we're confident we can make a product. And then 2 years after they released it, they re-announced Stalker 2, and this time it had the subtitle Heart of Chernobyl, and it's gonna be an Xbox console exclusive. We've talked about the story many times. The development of this re-announced Stalker 2 didn't go well. It's a Ukrainian studio, so they were affected, and they had to pause development, relocate their team, and, you know, just that would delay development. But in 2024, Stalker 2 finally released after a 15-year gap between games, and the game actually stayed kind of true to its Eurojank origins and was still broken and buggy. But, you know, it had that charm to it that the other ones had, so, like, it was still, like, a nice and cool game. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of the small gaming company known as Nintendo?
No, tell me about them.
So there's a couple of games that Nintendo has that have had big gaps between, and I don't really know where to land on how some of these should count, right? Because do you count Mario Kart and Mario as two separate franchises?
Yeah. Definitely.
You do? Definitely? Okay. Well, then there was a big gap between the two games because Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart, the new one.
World Tour?
No, is that what it's called?
I don't know. What is it called? Maybe it's just Tour?
Just World. I think Tour is the mobile one.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, it's called World.
Yeah, there was a big gap there. Mario Kart 8 originally came out in 2014, and we got a sequel in 2025 with a re-release somewhere in the middle.
Do we count the one where you buy like the toy cars, like the mixed reality one, and you drive around your house?
You know what? Yeah, let's start counting that. That's a mainline Mario Kart game.
I think it is. You know, I think that was peak pinnacle.
I don't know why people complained for so long when they had that.
Yeah, they should have just played that.
There was Pokemon Snap for the N64, and then new Pokemon Snap for the Switch almost 2 decades later. Luigi Mansion and Luigi Mansion 2. People are gonna get mad at how I pronounced that.
At least you didn't say what is it, Mario?
I was saying it because of that guy who shot that guy.
Oh, okay. I forgot about that guy. What's he up to?
I think he's in prison.
Skill issue.
Now, does Donkey Kong count as its own franchise? Or is that also a part of Mario?
No, I think it's its own franchise, yeah.
Well, then there was Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3. You could argue Donkey Kong 64 counts as a Donkey Kong Country game, like continuity-wise. And then there was nothing until Donkey Kong Country Returns came out later on for the Wii, and then they did Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, and that later got ported to the Switch. Pikmin, remember they announced like Pikmin 4 years ago, and it took like almost a decade of development time before that finally came out, and a long gap between 3 and 4. Kid Icarus Uprising, that's a wild game.
They still make Kid Icarus games?
They made one on the 3DS.
Oh, really?
There was the NES games, right? Or NES game, maybe just one?
There was one in the Game Boy game.
Yeah, something like that. And then there was nothing. Then Super Smash Bros. Brawl introduced Pit, redesigned, and then they were like, okay, we can do something. They made a 3DS game, like a on-rail shooter type game.
That makes it a 21-year gap. That's crazy.
It actually always looked really fun. I never played it. Another game on this list of a game I haven't played. And then they never did anything with it again. It was like the start of a new franchise that then never got anything else. And then you could make the argument between Wii Sports and Switch Sports, but that's not really worth talking about. There's a lot of examples you could pull from Nintendo, I guess, if we really wanted to get all specific, but you get the idea. With Nintendo, it's weird because it's like all of their franchises feel connected, especially because there's like Super Smash Bros. But then they're also all their own franchises at the same time. Star Fox had a big gap. There was 2006 Star Fox Command. There was like a remake of Star Fox 64 somewhere in the middle for the 3DS. And then 2016 saw Star Fox Zero, another reboot. And then there was nothing. And then there was Star Fox 2, which was an old game that finally got to release after however many years that was, 20 something years. And there was that one game, Starlink Battle for Atlas or whatever. That's not a Star Fox game, but it had Star Fox characters in it. And then that game flopped real hard.
It sure did.
Any other Nintendo titles that we're missing? I'm sure there's like 100 more.
I mean, Metroid Prime, I guess, right? I mean, that's coming back now.
Yeah, but so Metroid Prime's hard because it is its own thing, but also there's been Metroid games. Like, do you think Metroid Prime counts as its own thing separate from Metroid?
I mean, not fully. Like, it's just like half a point,
And then I was also thinking, I'm like, there was a break, but then there was Federation Force, which has Metroid Prime in the name, whether we like it or not. And then there was the remake a couple years ago.
And there was The Samus Returns for the 3DS as well. That was pretty good.
Well, that's not Metroid Prime though, right? That you were just saying that doesn't count.
Yeah, no. Oh, I thought we were just talking about the Metroid series.
Because at that point we start talking about Other M, and we get all the Nintendo fans in here talking about that, and it's a mess.
In the past, we've gotten some hate for including PT in a video about bad betas. And all we meant was we just wanted to talk about PT. I don't know. Cancellation of PT was the death of the Silent Hill franchise for a long time. I mean, there was Book of Memories in 2012, and then it just now came back a couple years ago with the remake of Silent Hill 2, and then Silent Hill F came out, and those were pretty well received, and now it's kind of back and there's going to be more games. But that also had a long break, like the Silent Hill franchise. I think Konami just wanted to make pachinko machines and mobile games, and then eventually they were like, that's a stupid idea, but it just took them a long time, and now here we are.
I gotta say, I never really played a Silent Hill game until F came out, and I played through most of it. I'm not done yet with it yet. I'm pretty far along though, and it's pretty good. I like it. Look at me not talking bad about a game. Did you know that the person who wrote the game's name is Ryukishi07? He just goes by his username. Doesn't have his real name. He's credited as his username.
That's kind of badass, honestly.
Like, you look at his Wikipedia page, it's just his username. His early life, they just he studied at vocational school, but it's his username. Pretty cool.
What if he legally changed it to that?
I might as well have. I mean, that's a cool way to keep your privacy, I guess. That's interesting that you bring up the idea of Eurojank as a specific genre, I guess. It made me think of two games, though, that we don't have on our list of potential games, but I think we should talk about, though. Did you ever play the Gianna Sisters game?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Like way back. It was pretty much like a Super Mario Brothers clone. It was a Super Mario Brothers clone. That's literally what the game was known for. And it was just like this bootleg game pretty much. I think Nintendo didn't quite go after them, but maybe sent a strongly worded letter to you guys need to pipe down with that.
Hey, cut this out.
Do you think there's people out there who are hardcore, diehard Gianna Sisters fans? And I'm just oblivious. Do you think there's a Gianna Sisters fan Discord server?
Yes.
Surely there's not. Dedicated just for people talking about that game?
I mean, they're more of a community of friends coming together to appreciate this Mario knockoff from the 80s.
Is it a beloved game?
Okay, all the Gianna fans in the comments, let us know.
Rise up. That game series is interesting because while there were a few random titles that did come out as official games, like a DS game later, it went on hiatus for years. And then I think there was a Kickstarter or something. It came back as just a standard indie platformer. It was fine. But then another game series a couple of years later came back after being one of the biggest icons of the 90s, Bubsy. You know where I'm going with this, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. Bubsy's a crazy game. I don't know if there's ever been a good Bubsy game. I don't think there has. Bubsy 3D is the pinnacle of video games of all time. It randomly came back, 2017? It kind of was just an asset flip of the Gianna Sisters revival. I mean, it was new levels, but you look at the two games side by side and tell me if you can tell a difference. Nobody talked about it back then because I think people were just shocked that Bubsy was even back. And then that game got a sequel, and that was unexpected. And then Bubsy kind of died again, but now there's a new Bubsy game coming out, and it's another 3D platformer. So I don't know how Bubsy keeps coming around, but here we are in 2025. Looking forward to the future of Bubsy next year. I feel like we got a lot covered. We're probably missing a couple. So if you need us to cover some more games, guys, let us know in the comments down below. Huge shout out to our YouTube members and our patron peoples. We see you. We appreciate you. I don't remember the last time we got a new person signing up on our Patreon or our YouTube members. So if you want to be that person, you could be that. And you get your name in the credits. And we see you. And we're like, hey, thanks. Woo! But yeah, otherwise the subscription goes a long way too. We appreciate that too. Comment, whatever. Yeah, but otherwise we'll see you. Watch this video that YouTube thinks you'll like. Okay, bye.